Hello, everybody. Welcome to our Blab on a Wednesday night. Usually we have our Millennial Talk chats on Tuesday, but because of last night's Republican GOP debate, we moved our chat to today, being that our chat is all about breaking down the debate. We are talking about so many different topics of discussion that was brought up during last night's conversations. I am your host for the evening, Chelsea Cross. Let me just put a disclaimer out there real quick. I am not a political expert. I am very interested in politics. I'm very interested in being as educated as possible to make the best decision for my future. But I'm a millennial expert. I'm a marketing expert. I am not a political expert, which is why I have brought on hopefully one of our guests who's trying to get in on the conversation. We're having a little technical difficulties with one of our guests, but we do have Alex on the line, so bear with us. Hopefully her connection comes through. I do have two incredible experts this evening. Yvonne, welcome to the chat.
All right.
You made it. Well, Yvonne, I'll let you get settled. We did start to record. So happy I'm seeing you right now. Let me hear your audio. Hello. Can you hear us, Yvonne?
Yes.
Okay, great. I was just about to introduce you and Alex, so perfect timing, fashionably late. So great. So, like I said, I'm not a political expert, which is why I have my two guests this evening with me. They happen to be experts in this space, and they also happen to be millennials, which just makes me that much more excited. So, like I said, tonight's chat is truly inspired by last night's debate. Last night's debate was the fourth GOP Republican debate. The theme was really about the economy, so a lot of the questions generated from and inspired by last night's conversation is going to be about, more of the economy-focused theme. Tonight, we are not about taking jabs at each other. It's not this divide between Republican, Independent, and Democrat. It's about our nation just trying to educate themselves again on who we want to vote for and gathering all the information we possibly can to make the decision. I know that so many people that I've talked to are just like, I just don't even know who to trust or how to make a decision. So hopefully tonight some of your questions can get answered. You can get in on the conversation at any time. We have the message portal open. You can send in any messages. You can call in throughout the hour. Of course, my Twitter feed is open. Send us in your questions with #Millennial Talk. And this is going to be a nice chat here. So no jabs, no hard feelings, no tears, just great content. So without further ado, let me introduce my two stellar millennial experts this evening. Our first guest is, I'm so happy she made it. She's representing the Republican Party. Yvonne Dean-Bailey happens to be 19 years old. She's a college student who happens to be the youngest woman elected to the New Hampshire House of Representatives. Also, the New Hampshire field director for Carly for America, which is just so incredible, and you're so young and dynamic. I'm so excited you're here. I was crossing my fingers your technology would support it, and you have arrived. Thank you. And then also my second guest, who's representing the Democratic Party, Alex Law, is 24 years old. He's progressive, running for the Democratic nomination for U.S. Congress in New Jersey, 1st Congressional District. His campaign has already knocked on 20,000 doors in his district as Alex attempts to become the youngest congressman elected since 1974. So we can't say that we're a group of underachievers here this evening. Yvonne, welcome to the chat. Alex, welcome to the chat. Yvonne, how are you doing tonight? Thank you so much for joining us.
I've got my phone set up. I've got the headphones on, and I'm ready to go.
Perfect. Alex, how are you doing? Loving the American flag behind you.
Yeah, I couldn't be more excited to be here, and I just want to congratulate Yvonne on her win. So amazing. I'm hoping to join you in the ranks of people that have won an election, but that's so wonderful, and happy to be here with both of you.
Oh, well, we are just getting started. As you can see, the conversation is starting to flow. So, Yvonne, what we're doing tonight, everybody, Alex, what we're doing tonight is we do have some generated questions inspired by last night's debate. We have 11 questions. Hopefully the hour will allow us to get through these 11 questions. Again, we will be taking in callers. I will be taking in questions from Twitter and also the Blab message board. So let's get to it. Our first I'm tweeting out our first question right now. Q1 officially sent out. Let's tackle Q1, which is, we'll start it off a little bit easy. In your opinion, let's start with Yvonne, ladies first. Which Republican candidate won last night's debate and why?
Well, clearly I'm a little bit biased, but I think Carly knocked it out of the park. I've been a supporter of Carly since May, when she was 16 out of 16, and she's consistently proving herself to be one of the best candidates out there. I think she was poised and articulate, and I think that she talked about crony capitalism in a way that no other candidate can. And that's something that really resonates with not just Republicans, but also Democrats and independents. And that is that we don't feel like we're in control. Washington lobbyists and, oh, my phone is on. Obviously. Yes, I think she knocked it out of the park and talked about issues that resonate with everyone, not just Republicans.
I have to say, and again, I feel like everyone, I'd also love to just shoot this question out there. A lot of people come up to me, and start to talk about politics, and they're like, oh, I assume that you're voting for Carly. And I was like, well, is that just because you think I'm a woman, or is that because you think I'm a feminist, or like, why do you expect for me, being a woman, to possibly vote for Carly? So Yvonne, as a woman who is pro Carly, how do you overcome that stereotype?
You mean in my support of Carly, or just as a woman being a state rep, or a little bit of both?
Both. As a woman, as someone who is obviously supporting her, but I'm sure it's not just because she is a woman. I just just to talk about the stereotype of, supporting your kind.
Absolutely.
I kind of don't even know how to answer that myself, and I'm just curious to kind of throw it on you and see what you think.
Yeah, I mean, I support Carly for a number of reasons. The major reason why I support her is because she's a political outsider, and I think she brings a fresh perspective that I really think that we need if we want to win the Republican seat in the White House again. And I just think that she is so articulate on the issues. She is so quick and she is brilliant. And like I said, I really like how she talks about crony capitalism and big government in ways that really resonate with people and land in their lap. So this is applicable ways how big government affects you. And I just don't think that any other candidate does that. That's why I support her. I think that she's a fighter. I think that she fights back, and when she fights back, I think that she can win. And I don't think gender has anything to do with that.
Oh, great response. And Alex, obviously your party was not, in action last night, but from the Republican nominees candidates, can you say that one of them shined through the most last night?
Yeah, well, I certainly can. And I'm happy that we're having a conversation about crony capitalism. And I knew that was going to be something that was brought up a lot because, Republican, Democrat, Independent, whoever, I think that's a big issue for millennials as a group, the biggest voting group in the country, that whatever side of the political spectrum you might fall on, I think that is an issue that sort of brings a lot of us together. And I do think that Carly did very well and represents that issue and is why that issue is why I'm the only Democrat running for office in New Jersey that supports Bernie Sanders. But in the debate last night, I think that actually Senator Rubio won the debate. When I watched the debate, I felt that he was the only one on stage that when he talked, people were really zoned in. And I thought he had a level of charisma that the other candidates were trying to catch up with. That isn't to say I think he won in a landslide. I think Senator Cruz did very well. I think Carly did very well. I actually think Governor Kasich did well, despite his interrupting. It sort of depends if that rubbed you the wrong way or not. But to me, I think Senator Rubio, if I had to pick, won the debate.
Interesting. Okay, so opinions across the board. Of course, for everybody participating, listening in, I want to hear your response to all of the questions as well. Sorry, I almost just choked on myself. I found it funny from one of Hillary Clinton's tweets last night. She said, it's hard to declare a winner in the GOP debate when every candidate is trying to move our country backward. And that tweet also had a picture of Jeb Bush saying, quote, most likely to fall asleep during his own speech. So, that leads me to another organic question off the top of my head. I get frustrated when watching these debates where they take the time, where they have not that much time to answer the question, to kind of fire against each other. Now, that comes with the territory of a debate, comes with the territory of politics. But as millennials, do you feel that, that authenticity, that transparency, we just want to hear how you want to better the country, not what jabs you want to take your time out of the little amount of time that you do have to fire against someone else?
Well, yes. Thought on that. Sorry to jump in. I apologize. So I think often we've seen in this election cycle, Democrats talk about how, the Republicans are calling each other names, but we're having a civil conversation. And I think Democrats are kidding themselves and ourselves that if we didn't have 9 people on stage, the exact same thing wouldn't be happening. And the fact that we have less candidates on stage has allowed the conversation to sort of ascend to that level where we can start getting to issues. And I think the Republican Party is struggling right now because with 9 people on stage, quite frankly, it's ridiculous to think we're going to get an intelligent opinion out of everyone. People have to do what they can to get that soundbite, to get them up in the polls, while still at the same time trying to have an element of intelligence in their response. And I think the nature of the amount of people in the race on the Republican side right now really contributes to that narrative of maybe name calling. Whereas I think when we move forward and some candidates sort of fall off the stage in a few months, we're going to see the Republican conversation really streamline into the issues that's important to them.
Mm.
Well, I think it also has to do with the difference in, I mean, I don't know if you watched the last debate, the CNBC debate, but they're completely different debates in themselves. And that I think this debate, candidates were a lot more poised. They didn't go after each other as much, and they were definitely cognizant of the name calling. And I know millennials as a generation, at least in my opinion, we're sick and tired of the name calling. And that's one of the reasons why millennials don't get involved oftentimes, is because politics doesn't seem as that it's a welcoming culture. Mm-hmm. It seems very partisan. And you can be principled, like I'm very principled, I'm conservative. And, I bet Alex is very principled as well. And he happens to be to the left. Mm-hmm. But there's also a sense of bipartisanship that I think that has been lacking throughout our entire government in the past several years. And I think that's one of the reasons why millennials have been not as engaged or less likely to be engaged.
Yes. And another candid question, being that you are both millennials who are specifically supporting current candidates running for president, what action are they taking to appeal to the millennial demo so that the millennial does resonate with some of their policies, beliefs, values? Because last night, being that we were talking about the economy, as at Daniel Bronick brought up, student loan debt really didn't shine through. And you would think that with the student loan debt crisis happening in our country right now, and especially trying to get those millennials to vote in their favor or appeal more to the millennial voter, they would have taken the time to talk about student loan debt. Now, none of the reporters prompted a question, but I was disappointed that it didn't get brought up in any conversation. Yvonne, how do you feel about that?
Well, I think that both parties really need to bring it to the forefront. I think a lot of times that both parties don't engage millennials enough. Sometimes, for the most part, millennials don't vote in presidential primaries. And I think that conversation needs to change. If we want more citizen engagement, especially in the millennial generation, we really need to start talking about student loan debt, just not on the Republican side, but also on the Democrat side, and hopefully getting towards some solutions, because it affects us all. My student loans are going to hit pretty soon, and I'm not very excited about that. And it affects all millennials. And we're a huge voting population once you get us involved.
Right. Alex, and obviously you are a Bernie Sanders supporter, but what is he doing, or what politicians do you think are doing it right in activating causes that millennials actually care about and are currently in a crisis about?
Well, I think that's actually been something that Bernie's been very good at. And I know we're here to talk about the GOP debate, but you're seeing enormous crowds show up. A lot of those crowds made up of young people, crowds 20, 30, 40,000 people show up to listen to him speak. On Reddit, there's 120,000 plus active users on his subreddit. Very good engagement. On the Democrat side, I think we've done a very good job in addressing student loan debt, and each of the candidates putting forward a plan to address it, either making community colleges free or finding a way to reduce student debt. And to me, on a side note, I think the politician doing the best job for student debt crisis is Elizabeth Warren, because like I say a lot on the campaign trail, right now students borrow anywhere from 6 to 12%. banks borrow at less than 1%. So right now we're turning our students into profit centers. They're our future. We're turning our banks into charities. And to me, that's not a situation that can continue if we want to be competitive in a global marketplace. Because at the end of the day, this comes back to results. And how are we moving our country forward to be more competitive, create more jobs, be more dynamic in an ever flattening world? And I think making sure that our students, our future, are educated is incredibly important towards that.
Interesting. Well, I think that one of the problems with student loans in itself is how much the government is involved in it. Sorry, my phone keeps falling. And that is that once the government gets involved in student loans, it becomes a very it's run by the government. There aren't a whole lot of options, when in reality, if there were a free market system, we'd have more options so that students can choose paths that are right for them. Whether you're going online or whether you're going to a vocational tech school, there's more options and more liberty when you have a free market system that encourages innovation in education, but also helps save you a few bucks down the road.
That leads me to, let's get to Q2, because we're going to get more towards free market than that it was being talked about last night. I wish I had a bell, because I'm sure we're all going to be talking over each other. I'm going to get my bell on for our next blab debate. Okay, Q2 is officially sent out via Twitter. Let's get to it. I'm going to direct it to Yvonne first as well. Why do millennials align more with an independent or Democratic Party?
I don't necessarily think that is true. And the reason I think that is because I really think that at the end of the day, millennials don't like to be put in a box. And that's why so many millennials, they align as independents, or sometimes they do align as Democrats, is because Democrats have been more engaged with millennials. It's just the way it has been. I think Republicans have typically not reached out to millennials and kind of seen it as a lost cause, when in reality, I think that is starting to change. And Carly's one of the candidates who is changing that. Mm-hmm. She's talking about big government. She's talking about Republican issues in a way that do resonate with young people. And I think that as more Republicans start to talk about it in that way, I think the conversation will start changing.
Let's cross our fingers. Alex, why do millennials align more with independent or Democratic Party?
Well, I think when we're talking about that question, it really comes down to an issue of values. And I think that the Republican Party has positioned itself, because of its alliance with the religious right, as a party that doesn't support LGBTQ rights. It doesn't support criminal justice reform. Things like what's happened in Alabama with DMVs closing only in African-American communities, which is intended to lower voter turnout in Democratic communities in the South. You don't hear a lot of stories like that happening with Democrats. Now, that isn't to say it doesn't happen, because in my district, we have one of the worst, most corrupt machines in the country, and they happen to be Democrats. So I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I think we're hearing those stories more. So I think millennials in general feel that these social issues like LGBTQ rights or marijuana policy, or things that affect them directly or their friends and family directly, are deal breakers for them. And right now, the Democratic Party is the one that has embraced expanding rights for folks, and oftentimes Republican candidates are not.
Well, do you think, I know, Yvonne, you're like chomping at the bit there, but do you think that Republicans and Democrats have some sort of a hot button stereotypes? So let's say, for Republicans, they are pro-life, they are less liberal, they're, more not into, gay marriage, where Democrats are a little bit more pro-gay marriage, pro-legalizing marijuana. But is that how we can define these two different parties? There's so much more meat to both parties.
Absolutely.
I think that this is the problem that we're trying to address here as millennials. And that is that we've been so boxed into party lines no matter who you are. I mean, as a Republican, yes, I believe 80% of the Republican platform, but there is some difference there where criminal justice reform, I think it's really important. Many Republicans do think it's important, because at the end of the day, we are one of the most incarcerated countries in the world. And being a fiscal conservative, I don't think it's too fiscally conservative. And I think that that is one of the reasons why millennials are not being as engaged. And that's because we are being so strict on, Democrats are this, you are a Democrat if you fit this platform, or you're a Republican if you fit this platform. And we're not really focusing on bipartisanship anymore. We're really focusing on who can be the farthest right and who can be the farthest left. And that's not.
Yeah, and that's why I'm so excited that you and I are the sort of future of this party and people like us who care about this kind of bipartisanship, because I think that's a great example of criminal justice reform. We have the same idea that we both see this being the land of the free, but our American creed doesn't match our deed, right? We're imprisoning more people than any country in the history of the world. We both see that as
the reason capitalism. And that's something that you and I both agree on, is that crony capitalism is one of the reasons why we are one of the most highest incarcerated countries in the world.
Let's define crony capitalism real quick. Like, I just don't want to assume that we throw out these.
Absolutely. We both probably have different aspects of it, but to me, it's when big corporations use their sort of money and influence to sort of keep it from being pure capitalism, where the best company or the best group is able to do the most business. But through their money and influence, they sort of rig the rules so that a specific group of cronies, of friends, are able to be successful.
Okay. Yvonne,
I agree with that. I mean, I agree with that for the most part. And it's just the fact that these big corporations, they can hire as many people as possible as they want. They can hire as many lawyers as they want. And something like the tax code, I mean, the tax code is tens of thousands of pages long. And big corporations like that, they have the time to read it. And they have the time to be experts on it. And I think this is something that Carly talks about a lot, which is what I like about her, is that the small business can't do that. The small business can't hire lawyers upon lawyers upon lawyers to go and file their taxes. And same thing with you and I. I mean, we can't hire lawyers and lawyers to go through our taxes either. And that's one of the reasons why I support Carly, is because she is against that sort of crony capitalism. And that's, I mean, to add on to Alex, that's how I would define it.
Okay, let's move on to question number 3, being that we're almost halfway through and only on question number 3. So most of the jabs from last night's candidates were aimed at Hillary Clinton. Hillary's name was mentioned 18 times, 13 of which were from Chris Christie in the undercard debate. And it's interesting. I was waiting for someone to bring up a different Democratic nominee, and they were really just targeting Hillary. So, Yvonne, being that you are Camp Carly, do you agree with Carly when she says, quote, that a Clinton presidency would be a disaster?
I do agree with her, to your surprise, I bet. But I definitely agree. And I think that one of the biggest aspects about Hillary Clinton right now, and I think that Alex and I can probably agree on this, is that I'm not sure how trustworthy she is. And that's how a lot of Americans feel, and the polling data supports it, that most people aren't sure if they can trust Hillary Clinton, which is one of her biggest areas. So regardless of policy, we're not sure if we can trust her. And I think that Americans deserve a leader that they can trust, and that if they're going to elect them to the White House, they can trust that they can be honest and do a good job and show leadership, and know that their president is going to be doing the best that they can.
Alex, what's your opinion?
Well, so here, my issue with Hillary, and it was sort of the singular issue that moved me from being in general a Hillary supporter to becoming a Bernie Sanders supporter, is that she talks a lot about campaign finance reform and how important it is. And to me, as a Democrat and many Republicans, it's one of the most important things, because we might all have different ideas on policy, but until we do something to address the ridiculously corrupt campaign finance reform or campaign finance system that we have, we're not going to be able to have those disagreements on policy. So she talks a lot about that, but then uses every loophole in the book to raise money for her super PACs and things like that, which is very disappointing to me, and speaks to sort of this idea of her not being as trustworthy of a candidate. And I think that there is an element of truth to that. With that being said, if she does end up becoming the Democratic nominee, I'm not going to say I would automatically support her, but I would prefer Hillary Clinton to quite a few of the Republican candidates. We just got to wait and see who emerges from that crowd.
So I took it to Twitter and conducted a poll. And the poll was, do you feel that Hillary's email scandal has tarnished your opinion of her? And interestingly enough, 52% said yes and 48% said no. So it's interesting how just that scandal alone, not that it was small potatoes by any means, did have a great impact on the way that people perceived or trusted Hillary. And so here's a follow-up question to question number 3, and I'm going to direct this to you first, Alex. So my follow-up question is, under President Obama, Democrats have lost 900 state legislature seats, 12 governors, 69 House seats, 13 Senate seats, and the source is the Daily Caller. So
one of them is mine.
So why would Democrats believe that the current policies put in place by Obama and his camp should be the policies that we continue to implement under a Clinton presidency, being that Hillary has vocalized that she wants to continue a lot of the momentum that Obama has started?
Well, I think first off, I'd like to say that I think President Obama has been an excellent president. We've seen unemployment rate drop dramatically under his guidance. I think he has struggled at times in dealing with a Republican-led Congress, which has led to a lot of frustration with him using executive action. But in general, I think he's been great on climate change. I think he's been great on jobs. I think when I look at how successful Republicans have been on the state level, and not in all instances, but I think the Republican Party has put an emphasis on winning those state elections through things like ALEC, which helps organize and write legislation and help candidates all across the country, whereas I feel the Democrats have put a huge emphasis on winning the White House. And sort of all our chips are on the table. If we don't win this, we're going to be in a really tough position. So I think it's been an issue of different priorities. But I do think that President Obama has been an excellent president, and I hope that whoever becomes the next president, things are built off of what he's been able to accomplish.
Okay. And Yvonne, how do you follow up with that?
I mean, I have to disagree. What was the original question? I think we strayed from the question a little bit.
The follow-up question was, just kind of being that we were on the subject of Hillary. She's stated that she wants to continue a lot of the momentum that the Obama camp has created, and I rattled off a bunch of seats in legislature that were lost.
Right. So I guess what I would add to that is I think that Americans are really looking for a change. I mean, we've had 8 years of Obama, and I think that people are ready for something new and something fresh, and not something typically from the typical politician, the typical senator, the typical governor that usually runs for president. And I think that's why you see that so many Republicans that are political outsiders, or even Bernie Sanders, he's a political outsider too, and he's doing very well in the polls. But Carly, Trump, Ben Carson, these candidates who are political outsiders who bring different experiences to the table and who are anti-Washington, they're doing well because people are so fed up with the way our government has been in the past 8 years and even more.
Now, I totally hear you, and I agree with that statement that we do want change. We need change. Our country is in a bit of a crisis at the moment in multiple different places. However, do you think that we're talking too radical of a change? I think people are watching the debates more like a reality show now that Donald Trump is on the stand, and they're just waiting to see what he would do. Are we swinging too far to the opposite direction because we're so frustrated with our country is right now? Alex, how do we find that happy medium within a presidential candidate?
Well, I don't necessarily, I think that happy medium is shifting because I think you're seeing Republicans and Democrats, like those of us on this tonight, agree on certain specific issues. We just disagree on how we get there. And I think we're seeing in Washington that not really be the way that our representatives are tackling problems. They're saying, I want to get there this way, and then the other side saying, I want to get there this way, and no one's looking up and saying, hey, we're running towards the same thing to make America a better country. So I think what we're seeing is the candidates that are making that point, the Bernie Sanders, the Carly, the Trump, the whoever, that we're trying to get better as a country. We're trying to move forward towards a successful place, and we need to stop caring so much about the partisanship on who gets credit for what and how we get there. And I think that's in part why some of those sort of outsider candidates are having so much success.
Great follow-up. Matt Crane sent in a great question that I would love to ask both of you. Yvonne, do you see the first candidate on either party side that brings a millennial topic of concern surging right away in the polls? So I think what he's trying to say is there a particular candidate that you see really activating for a millennial cause in particular?
I mean, if a candidate were to start really focusing on millennials, I do think that they would definitely, I don't know if they would surge in the polls because we're typically not the ones who are polled. Because number one, not a whole lot of millennials vote in presidential primaries. But I do think that a lot of candidates are going to start talking about this as we get closer to the election, because especially on the Republican side with 17 candidates running, you have to reach outside the box and you have to look into these different niches that other candidates haven't tapped into, which, for example, millennials. I think that Carly does a really good job of speaking about big government, because if we're talking about messaging, Republican messaging to millennials, that's something that resonates. People understand that big brother, I don't want the government in my life. I want to be able to do my own thing. I want to be able to be my own person. And I think that that message really resonates well with young people. So I think once we start talking about that, and once I think Carly's going to focus on that a lot more, I definitely see that more millennials are going to be engaged in hopefully the Republican primary, and we can see how it pans out.
Well, hopefully we're starting the trend here with engaging in millennials. Yeah. So I'm going to move on to question 4, being that it's 5:30. So I'm really interested to actually get to this question because the question has already been sent out on Twitter. It is it realistic to think that America can get back to a free market principles and constitutional liberties with the amount of corruption taking place in the government today? Carly definitely did take a lot of time to talk about getting back to a free marketplace in last night's debate, as well as Cruz did. So my question, so that is the question, but I feel like the elephant in the room is the corruption of government today and the corruption of the White House today. And it's so interesting to be watching these GOP debates, and you're looking at someone who's going to be our next president talking about how bad the corruption is. So with corruption being definitely the elephant in the room, but everybody knows it. Now, is it realistic? Is a free market principle something tangible that this country could get back to? Alex, take it away.
Yeah, so there's a couple things there. So one, I would take exception with saying that there's a corruption in the White House. I don't think anyone would say that Barack Obama is corrupt. Maybe, but some people would say that, but I would disagree with that statement. I would also disagree with the idea that we should be sort of blindly marching towards sort of these free market ideas. I think that free market and capitalism and entrepreneurship is sort of the heart of the American economy, but we need to be careful how we do that. I'm someone who studied finance. I've worked in big Fortune at IBM. It was one of the biggest companies in the country. And a lot of these big companies don't pay any taxes. The financial crash happened in large part because there was no regulation on certain parts of the financial sector. So they were able to do things and take big risks with essentially all of our money. So I think when I think about free market ideas, I think about how we need to regulate these enormous companies, this crony capitalism system, and we need to make sure that we get the freedoms and the fair playing field back to small and mid-sized businesses. In my district and districts all across the country, those are the companies that actually hire people in America, create jobs in America, are the centerpieces of community, are the centerpiece of the middle class, which drives American growth. So I think for me, in getting back to that, and I do think it's possible, and I do think it's doable with good candidates, not just at the White House, but in local, state, federal, county office, that we can get back to that. But we need to put the emphasis on small and mid-sized businesses because they drive our growth.
Yvonne?
I agree with Alex's last point there. I really do think we need to focus on small and mid-sized businesses because that's our local economy. That's the local grocery store. That's the local bank. I mean, we need a leader at the top of the ticket at the White House who will focus in on those issues, but also show leadership. And once you have a leader in the White House who he and hopefully she, in my opinion, once she shows her leadership skills, I do think that they will resonate with the big companies, the mid-sized companies, the small companies, and hopefully we can start in a direction that does bring us back to our free market principles that we started our nation on. But I do think that we need leadership at the top of the ticket all the way down for that to be able to happen.
All right. Well, that brings us to Q5. So I'm sending out Q5 via Twitter right now. According to the GOP debate last night, where I loved the Facebook integration so you can know what type of engagement was happening in the social space in addition to the conversations on stage, the subject of taxes was allegedly one of the most trending topics of discussion. So I'd love to attempt to tackle the topic of taxes. So Yvonne, Q5, what candidate I think I know who you're going to say.
I think we're both a little biased here.
You know what? Because obviously both of you, we know Yvonne, Carly, Alex, Bernie, maybe we can elaborate as to more on the why than the who, but which candidate's tax proposal do you most agree with and why? I'm really interested in this question because as someone who is a millennial and is, not a political expert, but I am a citizen of the United States and would like to have a nicer tax situation going on, I don't understand all of the things that they're rattling off with all their numbers and making it so difficult to, really conceptualize unless you take the time to go look at their tax reform plan online. So in a nutshell, can you both, explain as to what tax reform plan you like and why, and maybe make it relatable, the Cliff Notes version to why?
Absolutely. And, a lot of people feel that way, especially a lot of millennials. They see taxes as, this huge overburdened system that is too complicated. We have to hire people to do it for us. No one likes going to H&R Block to do their taxes every year. And so what I like that Carly advocates for is simplifying the tax code and making hopefully a 3-page tax code that everyone can understand, and that people like me and people like you can read through it, understand it, and be able to fill it out ourselves. So we don't have to hire these extra accountants, and even bigger businesses. They don't have to have these huge amount of lawyers and to be able to navigate their own taxes. So I think that a simpler tax code would really benefit us as millennials specifically, and then everyone else. So I think that a simpler tax code.
It seems that Carly has the agenda of really putting this 3-page tax code into motion. She's talked about it now in multiple debates. But it sounds like such an ethereal situation, because how do you take 73,000 pages and condense it into 3 pages? Can you give us a little bit of like an inside, scoop as to how she plans on really consolidating to make it a 3-page tax code? Because it sounds like a wonderful situation to only have it to be 3 pages, but how can that be done?
Well, the first thing that you could start off with is having it be fair for people like you and I, fair for corporations, and so that people are taxed equally and are able to understand their tax code. I personally, it's a 70,000 page tax code. I don't know if I can give you the full briefing on it, but just making it simpler so you and I can understand it, the local business can understand it, and just making things fair and simple, because right now it's not fair and simple. And corporations that can hire dozens of lawyers are able to navigate it and find loopholes and do what they can to, pay the least amount of money as possible. So condensing that is the best way for us to not only jumpstart our economy, but be able to save more money as young people like to do.
Alex, what about you?
Well, I think this is one of the issues that we're actually probably closest on, and that I totally agree, whether we're talking about taxes or finance or law or healthcare, having these enormous documents that normal Americans have literally no chance of understanding is horrible. And I think a lot of that comes back to, again, campaign finance reform, because you have lobbyists writing the legislation, writing it with loopholes built in so that they can take advantage of it. So I agree, the tax code should be shorter. Whether it's 3 pages, 5 pages, 2 pages, 1 pages, I don't know. But I think that is an element that we need to have, that we need to shorten it. We need to close the loopholes. Mm-hmm. If we close the loopholes on the mega wealthy corporations like GE that pay literally negative taxes, everyone else, our taxes go down. Normal people, small businesses, middle-class people, all of our tax rates dramatically go down if the extremely wealthy, the extremely large corporations actually pay their fair share. To me, you look at things like very wealthy people pay a lot of their taxes in capital gains. So they pay in the teens, whereas the janitor that cleans their office might pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes. And to me, that's fundamentally wrong. To me, that's something we need to do something about. And I think a simpler tax code, whether it's Carly's or another candidate's, if it would do something to help that issue, to help everyday Americans, I would certainly support it. And just reading some of the comments very quickly on the side, I mean, we have a lot of people are saying how they're so skeptical that it could happen. And I'm right there with you, because we're fighting against the most powerful, the most wealthy. These are the people that benefit from this complicated, horrendous system that we currently have. And speaking to Yvonne's idea that, we need a charismatic leader to lead and push forward, or else we're going to have no chance to get through those. I think that there's definitely an element of truth to that. So it's a very difficult, very complex issue. And I really hope that we can do something about it, because literally millions of Americans could have their lives changed for the better overnight if we could do something about this.
And it seems to be that when every, election, every 4 years it comes around, taxes are always being talked about, right? I mean, we can't have an election and debates without talking taxes, but something drastically needs to change due to our, current economy and making sure that we don't, go into another 2008 type of financial crisis. Do you think that we have the potential and the possibility to see change within the next 4 years, depending on obviously which candidate gets into the White House, but will we see significant change? Do you believe so, Yvonne?
Oh, I believe so. I mean, I support Carly because I do think that she has the leadership skills to get things done. I think that she can work with not only a Republican House and a Republican Senate, but I think she can work with a Democratic House and a Democratic Senate if that was given to her. I think that she has the leadership skills to actually create change, and whether it be talking about the tax code and shrinking the tax code, or talking about immigration. I think that she has the leadership skills to be able to do that. And I do think it takes a special person to be able to do that. I'm not sure that every candidate running can start and create that change, because with Obama, I don't believe that we actually got a lot of change with Obama. And same thing with other candidates in the past. I think it takes a political outsider to be able to create that change, and I think she would be able to do it.
All right, let's move on to question number 6. It was officially sent out on Twitter as well. Alex, we'll go to you first. Would raising the minimum wage to $15 help or hurt the economy?
Well, I mean, this is an issue that I feel extremely strong about. I've posted about it on the Huffington Post. I posted about it on my Facebook page, facebook.com/AlexLawNJ. To me, Fight for 15 is vitally important. We need to raise the minimum wage. Right now, 42% of American workers make less than $15 an hour. Every time, despite what was said in the GOP debate last night, if you actually look at the data, every single time the minimum wage was raised federally, we've actually seen an increase in jobs. And the reason for that, one of the big reasons, is it eliminates churn. Because in business, churn is the cost of having to go out, find, hire, and train new employees and get them up to the efficiency of the bad employee that just left, or the employee that left because they weren't making enough money. So actually paying people a fair wage is important. Also, to me, morally, we live in the richest country in the history of the world. And I reject any argument that says if you work a full-time job, you can't have food and a roof above your head. And that's the case right now. Republicans talk a lot about how we need to reduce welfare. Well, right now, I can't blame people where if you're making $7 an hour or less after taxes are taken out, and if you go on welfare, you can find a way to get $11 or $12 an hour for your kid. You have to do that. People are being incentivized right now into welfare. And I think that raising the minimum wage is an absolute mandatory thing that we need to do. And just the last point I'd like to make, since 1968, the minimum wage has actually gone down about 24% in buying power, which at the very least, I think we should all be able to agree that the minimum wage should at least equate its historical average. And right now, that's absolutely not the case. Middle-class people, poor people in this country are being ignored by politicians. And it's something that when I get to DC will be one of the very first things I do, along with introducing something for term limits, because I think that is so important, that we can't have politicians in there forever, because for every Ted Kennedy that we lose for that, there's 15 or 20 or 100 horrible politicians that we get rid of.
Yvonne?
Well, I think that something that was neglected to be mentioned is that, I mean, I don't think that people should be unable to feed their families, of course. But I think that the problem that we actually have in our economy is that we don't have enough full-time jobs. We don't have enough jobs that are paying more money. And that's because some of the regulations that have been forced on our economy by the Obama administration has been strangling our small businesses, whether it be Obamacare or other regulations. Some of these small businesses are not able to hire as many people as they want. And if we were to increase the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour, a lot of times it's going to be cheaper to hire less employees, and so there'll be less jobs for people who need them. I would much rather have a lot of people be able to be paid $10 an hour than just a few people to be paid $15. We need to make sure that there are enough jobs out there for everyone to be able to access them. And I don't think that having a federal minimum wage be $15 an hour is going to stimulate our economy, but I think it's going to strengthen it.
I do want to add that I did fact check this question in particular because I was curious. And the University of Chicago asked 42 leading economists to predict whether a $15 minimum wage would reduce employment. About 40% said that they were not sure, and the rest were equally divided between yes and no. And that's the source was the New York Times for that. So interestingly enough, there's still not a clear yes or no kind of answer from.
Would you? I see a question that someone asked me on the side at Elite Millennial. I just want to answer it in 10 seconds because I want to make sure we get some people engaged. So they asked, what program would I implement to allow these marginalized people to enhance their skills to provide more value in the marketplace? And very quickly, just off the top of my head, I think it's extremely important in our education that people or students are taught skills that will make us more competitive in a global marketplace. Things like coding, things like computer science, because these are jobs that are going to be very important in the future. I also think that we need to subsidize and put money into and encourage investment in entrepreneurship and sustainable energy. Forget the moral argument, which obviously I agree with. I think sustainable energy equals sustainable jobs in this country. So if we can train people for that and encourage entrepreneurship in sustainable energy, that is technology that we can export to the rest of the world. That is American know-how that will let us lead the world again in manufacturing for energy and in terms of service and technology. So just very quickly answering that question, those are just some thoughts I had. I wanted to make sure we gave a shout out to the crowd that were asking.
And let's actually dig a little bit more onto that topic. Perfect segue for Q7, which is more jobs lead to a stronger economy. So which candidate has the best plan to create more jobs for the 40% of Americans who are unemployed? Yvonne?
Just to clarify, I don't believe that 40% of Americans are unemployed. It's more around 5%. Yeah. My understanding.
I'm so sorry. Thank you for correcting.
No worries at all. But I think that the statistic was that 40% of millennials make up those who are unemployed. And I think that the best way to combat that is are we losing me? I think the best way to combat that is by making sure that we're encouraging people to go into STEM sciences and making sure that we are majoring in things or directing jobs towards engineering and things that are more lucrative. And so that when people major in math and sciences, they're able to be more hireable when they come out of college. So I think that having focusing our efforts on increasing those sort of jobs and careers is definitely going to help our millennials.
Yeah. Yep, and for me, right, so when I look at unemployment numbers, right, Obama's done a great job of bringing them down in general, but one place that's particularly close to my heart because my district has one of the poorest towns in America, Camden, New Jersey, in it, that we see tremendous unemployment is with urban African-American youth, especially in the male community. And I think it's so important that we do a couple of things. I think it's important that we have criminal justice reform so that we can get nonviolent drug offenders out of prisons. It saves us money. It allows these people to become tax-paying members of society. It doesn't ruin their future. So I think that's so important because so many people in these urban communities are essentially unemployable. I also think that we need to make sure that we encourage entrepreneurship in these growing communities, in these poorer communities. Right now, I think a lot of people, Democrats included, see the solution to urban decay is encourage large companies to come in and hire big swaths of people at one time. And that can work. Sometimes we've seen it work in Baton Rouge. We've seen it fail miserably here in Camden. But I think, and I think a lot of people would agree, that we need to make sure that if we're going to be incentivizing business, that we're incentivizing those small and mid-sized businesses, because they will hire people in the communities. They will look out for people, make sure they're getting the training, the continued education, that they're up and efficient on their work and their job. And I think that is so very important, that we make sure that although overall unemployment numbers are coming down, that we don't forget about people in urban environments that often feel that they're forgotten about by their government.
And I think one of the best ways to also combat that is by really investing in education and making sure that all students are being able to learn the way that they want to, whether that's going to a charter school or a private school or a vocational school, and really enforcing school choice in some of these communities where students don't have the opportunity to go to that expensive private school, that they are extended that opportunity. And, you know, I think education is one of the most important parts of a person's life, and I think that it can really pick someone up. So it's making sure that those young students in poorer communities are able to have that opportunity. You can really affect lives.
All right. Well, our next question, Q8, is a big one, and we have less than 10 minutes, and I definitely want to address Obamacare. So question number 8. Yvonne, we'll start with you. Most of the Republicans running for president have promised they would repeal the Affordable Care Act. What do you think our country needs in place of it if it does get repealed?
You know, and this is one of the reasons why I support Carly, is because I believe that we really need to focus on a free market system. And what she has said is true, and that we've never tried it. It's always been a cozy game between healthcare companies. And now that the government is very heavily involved in that, in my opinion, I think it should be more managed by the states. And I think that is, if we were to repeal Obamacare, which in my opinion, hopefully we do, that's what we need to replace it with. And we also need to recognize that there are some good parts about Obamacare. And that happens to be, you know, millennials being able to stay on their parents' insurance until they're 26. And other things like making sure that pre-existing conditions are covered. Those are some of the good things about it, but I do think that we need to result to more of a free market system. So millennials like you and I can choose what we want in our healthcare, and we're not saddled with these extra things that we don't worry about.
Alex, you have the floor.
Great. Well, I mean, this is an issue that is so incredibly important to millions of Americans. And I think Obamacare has had its problems. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the compromises that had to be made in order to get it passed. And there's a lot of legislative issues with it, but not getting bogged down into that. Something that is unbelievably important to me is the fact that we've seen by far the largest drop in uninsured Americans in the history of our country. We've seen it go from 13% in 2013 down to 10% in 2014, even lower now. So the number one thing that Obamacare set out to do, the Affordable Care Act set out to do, was to lower the amount of people that were uninsured. So it's been very successful at that. And I do think there are a lot of improvements that we need with our healthcare system. I think it's absolutely ludicrous that, you know, we are the only Western nation that doesn't have free healthcare. I think it is a right for people to be able to go to the doctor when they're sick and not have to stay home and suffer or not be able to get treatment for cancer. It's totally horrible. Healthcare should not be a luxury for the rich. And to shout out to Yvonne, I think that the private sector option, she's just saying, hey, we want to get to a place where everyone can have it. I think we go this way. I personally think we should have a single payer system that then allows the private marketplace to be active. But in general, we cut down all the bureaucracy and how insurance dealt with. And I think that's how we get there. But I think us millennials and a lot of other Americans can agree that healthcare isn't something that should only be for the rich. We need to find a way, whether it's the conservative solution, whether it's the progressive solution, that all Americans can go to the doctor, that all Americans don't need to watch their kids suffer or their parents suffer because they don't have money or insurance or aren't fortunate enough to have a wealthy family. And I can't understate how important that issue needs to be for all of us.
I so support both of your answers to that question. I'm happy that we could thoroughly really cover that because we do have 5 minutes left. I'm going to skip over Q9 and move to Q10, being that these were some of the most highly rated topics from our polls that we did prior to this chat. So let's move on to Q10. Q10 is, Homeland security was trending topic last night in Facebook as well as Twitter. What do we need to do about foreign intervention and ISIS? Yvonne?
So, I mean, I think the biggest thing that we need to realize is that ISIS is a huge concern to our nation. And when we're talking about foreign spending, we really need to focus on where our money is being spent. And this is something that I like that Carly focuses on really well. And that is we do have a very, very large amount of defense spending. But what we don't do now is we don't manage it well. We don't know where every dollar is being spent. We don't know how to effectively manage our money. And I think that when we have such a big foreign threat, such as ISIS and some of these other groups, that we really need to make sure that we know how our money is being spent, that we're being innovative with our money. I mean, we're in a 21st century economy. We should be as innovative as possible, especially in our government sector. And when dealing with foreign threats such as this, we should be up to the latest technology, and we should be using that money to make sure that we are technology advanced, which we are not now.
Alex?
Yeah, so I agree with certainly a big part of that we could have a more efficient, better military with more efficient spending. We're purchasing tremendous amounts of things that the Pentagon says we don't even need. But to me, a lot of our debt has come from our military spending, our intervention in the Middle East, our war in Iraq. And I would argue that it hasn't actually made us all that more safe. If we're having an honest conversation with ourselves about how we balance the budget, about our role in the world, about how do we accomplish the things that America wants to accomplish, I think we need to look at and really think about the question, have we created more terrorists than we've killed? I talk a lot about if I was living in New Jersey and there was a drone plane from China flying in the sky and every once in a while my neighbor's house blew up and I didn't know anything about China. And I maybe didn't even like my neighbor, but the fact that I was living in a state of fear like that would make me hate China. And I think we're putting America in that position in the Middle East with our drones flying everywhere, with us invading places whenever we want. And every time I think we've had a just reason to go and do what we're doing. We're trying to protect the world. We're trying to fight terrorists. But the reality is if we're looking strategically long term, I think we're actually creating more terrorists than we're destroying. And we need to look at how do we attack these foreign policy issues with a coalition to make sure that the rest of the world isn't saying American taxpayers can pay for all of our problems, because that cannot continue to be the case or we will bankrupt ourselves. We need to look to lead the world through teamwork and participation rather than with drones and military might. Now, we do need to keep ourselves safe. We need to spend efficiently, all that stuff I agree with, but we need to have that honest conversation with ourselves, how to evaluate our military spending.
And I think that seems to be the common thread amongst both of us, all three of us. And in addition to the common thread of how millennials perceive politics is, transparency and honesty, and where is that money going to? And is that money going to the right thing versus the wrong thing? And I just have to bring up a statement from one of our participants who said, ISIS isn't as big of a threat as healthcare and education and the poor. And that kind of struck a chord, because we're comparing our healthcare crisis in the U.S. and our education in the U.S. to radical terrorist group. So it's just a strong notion as to how we feel about, wasting money or being skeptical as to where the money is being spent. So 60 seconds left. Let's do a rapid fire last question. I'm really want to get to this last question, Q11. Yvonne, we will start with you again. Let's talk about immigration. Is it realistic to deport between 11 to 12 million illegal immigrants and actually, pluck them out of their homes here in the U.S. and, deport them back to their native home?
Well, I think Carly really speaks well about this, and that is that we do need to address that issue. But what we need to do first is we need to seal the border. It's something we've been talking about for years and years and years, and no one has done it. No one has had the leadership to actually seal the border. And I mean, we've been talking about this for election after election after election, and no one has done it. So I think that before we address that issue, we really need to seal our border first and then work from there.
Alex?
This is probably the issue that we disagree on the most. I think totally unrealistic to say we're going to kick 11.5 million people out. I also think it's pretty unrealistic for us to build a giant wall or seal our borders. I mean, our quota system for the people that we let in legally is ridiculous. It's like a few hundred unskilled people from Mexico are let in every year. And we're just kidding ourselves if we think that there's not going to be an influx of people coming in. And I do think as we legalize marijuana in this country, we take power away from cartels in Mexico, which disincentivize people to go through the desert, pay a coyote, get over the border just to go to a country to make a few dollars an hour, where in regions where often people dislike them. So I think that's something that will help that. But for me, with immigration, instead of focusing on deportation, we should focus on a path to citizenship. I really believe that we should say, if you come forward, say you're an illegal immigrant, pay your taxes, don't get in trouble, work, and are a productive member of society for 10 years, for 15 years, whatever it has to be, that you should be able to earn your way to a citizenship. And as we deal with those people, bringing them into the tax-paying society, we can look at how we deal with bringing people, new people into the country, how we secure our borders, whatever that means, whether it's increasing quotas, whether it's what have you. I think we need to find a way to start treating illegal immigrants like human beings rather than talking about them in the boxes. Oh, let's kick them out. No, let's move them over here. So that's my thought on that.
And it'll be really interesting to see how that conversation continues to expand as we get into more of the debates. But it is past the hour. I do want to give both of you the opportunity to totally have the floor and really give your last thoughts on millennials participating in government, any causes or social issues that you stand for. This is totally your time. So Yvonne, take it away.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for letting us have this discussion tonight. This was great, and it was great to talk to Alex, who is very brilliant, and I wish him good luck in his congressional race. And, you know, I just think that people need to tune in. People need to watch the debates, try and find your candidate. I mean, I support Carly, and I think you should look into her too, but, you know, just check them all out. See who you like, watch all of the debates, and just try and be informed. And once you do find your candidate, I mean, I'm from New Hampshire, so I'm a big fan of the First in the Nation primary. Get involved, reach out to them, and try and help your candidate as much as possible. And hopefully, I think that if all millennials actually volunteer for the candidate that they like or volunteer for the cause that they like, that we can actually create change. So it's however you want to do it. And thank you for having me.
Oh, well, I'm so happy you made it. And again, congratulations on being 19 and such a force. I can't wait to watch what else you do. And just knowing that there are millennials like yourselves who are so passionate and so ready to create change and implement, you know, things that millennials, the future is looking for and hungry for, makes me think that we have some hope. So Alex, your turn. You have the floor. Last minute thoughts, wrap up words.
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words. And I think I'm just happy. I just made 2 new friends tonight, and hopefully a lot of other friends that have been watching this. I want to just take a quick second to talk about my campaign and how we've been running it, because it's been a whirlwind. We've knocked on 20,000 doors in the last 8 weeks. In 1 week alone, I walked 100 miles in all 52 towns in my district to knock on doors. So it's been incredibly grassroots. It's been one vote at a time, old-fashioned American politics. We have over 40 interns working for us, which you can't see the size of our office, but I'm sure it's smaller than most of your bedrooms. They're all young people excited about getting involved and being a part of the process. So I would encourage anyone who wants to learn more about the things that I care about to check out my website, to go over to our Facebook page. Like I said, facebook.com/AlexLawNJ. We have conversations there every single day, whether it's videos or posts about national issues. So it's not just about our district. And I would just encourage you to get over there and share the content and tell people about it. Your voice really does matter. And I really hope to engage with all of you as we move forward. So just thank you so much. It's really been my privilege to be here.
Alex, well, again, best of luck on your campaign. Alex is attempting to become the youngest congressman elected since 1974 in New Jersey. So I am rooting for you. Again, any way I could support both of your causes, you know, in the social space, I am here, and I truly mean that. Thank you, everyone. I didn't take any callers tonight because it was literally just flying by, but the conversation was so dynamic, and I was reading every single message and trying to and paying attention at the same time. Multitasking at its finest. I can't thank the two of you enough for joining me. Hopefully we will have many more conversations like this to help engage and excite millennials to become that much more interested and passionate about politics. I bid everyone adieu. Alex and Yvonne, thank you again. Have a great night, everyone, and we'll see you next week for Millennial Talk back on Tuesday.
Thank you.
Have a great night, everyone.